The chronological Bible reading for January 17th is Genesis chapters 16 through 18. In chapter 16, we see Abram and his wife Sarah create their promise from God with their own flesh, with their own hands. Have you ever noticed when you get ahead of God's promises, nothing good comes from that? That's exactly what Saul did when he was king of Israel. He decided to go ahead and make the offering because he didn't see the man of God coming to do it. He was impatient, and he got ahead of God, and it cost him everything. God made Abram a promise, and Abram took it upon himself to make that promise come true. Many times God gives us promises and we take it upon ourselves. We try to make it happen in our own flesh, and what does that do? It causes strife and division. Sarai gives her maidservant Hagar to Abram. They come together and they create a new life. His name is Ishmael. But then Sarai and Hagar begin having trouble in their relationship, likely because of the jealousy that Sarai was feeling watching Hagar nurture this child who was within her. It leads to years of strife, and I think it's also worth noting that we're told twice in those first couple of verses of chapter 16 that Hagar is Egyptian. Now, this is certainly not any slight against any ethnicity or nationality. Egypt represents slavery to the world system. The Israelites were slaves in Israel for 400 years. This is not at all about judging people based on where they come from. It's what these names and places represent. What happened to God's chosen people when they were in these places? In yesterday's reading, when Abram and Sarai went to Egypt, Abram feared for his life and had to lie to Pharaoh, saying that Sarai was just his sister, not also his wife. Pharaoh in Exodus represents Satan as taskmaster over this world system that keeps God's people enslaved. And when Moses went to Pharaoh initially to ask that they could just have a weekend off to go and worship God, Pharaoh responded, "You have time to think about worshiping God? We're going to double your workload. Now you can go make bricks without hay." It's not a coincidence that Sarai and Abram went to the daughter of Egypt and created for themselves a son in an attempt to fulfill the destiny that God had given them. And it backfired. And even today, the Arab people who have been warring with the Jews for the last 5,000 years are descendants of this Ishmael. Nobody wins when we operate in the flesh, when we try to make God's promises come true by our own strength. In chapter 17, God gives Abram the covenant of circumcision. Even today, every male in your household will cut away his flesh. And of course, it was a physical act. But the physical act didn't save anyone or cleanse anyone. It was representative of a spiritual truth. God has been saying for all of this time, you can't get to me in the flesh. I am a spirit being. I join to your spirit. Cut away your flesh. Stop pleasing and gratifying your flesh. Stop doing the things that are carnal, that appeal to your physical body. Start focusing on the spiritual, where we can have relationship together with the Most High God. It was when Abraham and his entire household cut away their flesh through circumcision that God reaffirms his promise and says, you will have a son. It will be through your wife, and it will be a miracle, because it's not something you could possibly accomplish on your own. It's not something that would even be physically possible according to the ways of this world, but because you have cut away the carnality of your sinful flesh nature. Abram, Sarai, I'm changing your names. I'm giving you a new identity, and I'm going to fulfill a promise I made to you all those years ago. Scripture tells us Abraham was a friend of God. What does that mean to you, to be a friend Think about the friends you have in your life. When you talk with them, do you just ask them for stuff? Do you have a transactional relationship? Jesus said to his disciples, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends, because servants don't know what their masters are up to, but I've told you everything. We, by extension, have been given the opportunity to enter into relationship with the Most High God as his friends. And I say all of this to frame chapter 18. Very respectfully, Abraham goes into God's presence and says, with all due respect, I hope that I'm not overstepping my bounds as your friend. I recognize you're still king and I'm not. But I've heard that you plan to destroy this city, and I have people there. What if there were just 50 righteous people in that city? Would you destroy the righteous with the wicked? Surely you wouldn't do that, would you? And Abraham barters with God to get down to this level of just 10 people. If there are 10 righteous people in that city, would you spare the city for the sake of those 10? This conversation takes place through the conduit of friendship, mutual respect born out of a relationship. And Abraham was able to talk with God the way you and I would speak to one another. Whatever it is you're doing, however you're spending your time, is God there with you? Are you aware of his presence? Are you enjoying his presence? Are you asking him how he thinks and what he feels about the different things that are being processed through your brain? Is he part of your life? Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians 5 to pray without ceasing, to be in constant communication with our King as a friend. My wife, Heather, and I could be in the same room. She might be working on her laptop and I might be reading a book or watching television, but we're there together. Even when neither of us is speaking, we're aware of each other's presence and the lines of communication are always open. So should it be with us and our God. Think about him, dwell on him, listen for his voice, and develop a relationship like Abraham had. God bless you, my friends. Thank you for tuning in and all of your support. We'll see you tomorrow.